We're moving in Friday, my sister announced via text message. Mom had already given her approval. My hand moved on instinct, phone unlocked, security system active. Doorbell camera, live feed running, then my screen flashed again. Unauthorized entry detected. Law enforcement notified. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love knowing who's part of this community. Most people would have read a message like that and spiraled. They'd call their mom, shouting about boundaries, or send their sister a long emotional essay pleading for respect. That's not how I function. Panic clouds judgment. I'm a data security analyst for a Fortune 500 corporation. My career revolves around spotting threats, evaluating exposure, and shutting down breaches before systems are compromised. So at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, I didn't read a family update. I saw a phishing attempt, an unauthorized access request trying to brute force its way into my life. I didn't respond. Engaging a hostile actor only confirms the endpoint is valid. Instead, I placed my phone on the nightstand and picked up my tablet. I opened the smart home dashboard for my historic Chicago brownstone and tapped the shield icon. Lockdown protocol engaged. Steel shutters slid over the garden-level windows with a low mechanical hum. Electronic deadbolts on the front and rear doors snapped shut, secondary steel pins engaging. Courtyard motion sensors recalibrated, sensitivity cranked to maximum. My home isn't just a residence. It's a controlled environment. I bought it 18 months ago, gutted the interior, rebuilt it, and personally wired every inch. It's my refuge, my command center, the only place on earth where my family's disorder couldn't reach me. My phone vibrated again, another message from Destiny, then a missed call from my mother, Lisa. Then a notification from a group chat I never remembered joining. I handled them the same way I handle malware warnings. Swipe, delete, temporary block, quarantine the compromised files. I went downstairs to the garden level. This was the area Destiny was referring to. She called it the guest suite. My mother called it the spare apartment. They were both wrong. It was my workspace. 3 server racks, dedicated cooling. 4 monitors streaming live data feeds that required top-tier clearance to even view. It wasn't a backdrop for my 23-year-old sister's TikToks. And it definitely wasn't a crash pad for her boyfriend, Caleb. A man who looked like catalytic converter theft was a recreational activity. I sat at my desk and pulled up my security contractor's contact information. It was after midnight, but I sent the email anyway, flagged urgent. The rear garden gate needed reinforcement. Decorative wrought iron was charming, but it was a weak point. I approved the rush fee, approved overtime. Cost was irrelevant. My family thought they were dealing with the old Samantha, the apologetic one, the peacekeeper, the version who shrank herself to avoid conflict. They didn't realize that model had been sunset years ago. They thought they were coming for a casual stay. They were walking straight into a firewall. I watched the monitors as green status lights blinked steadily in the dark. Perimeter secure. Let them try. I wasn't operating a shelter. I was maintaining a fortress. The next morning, the financial pressure hit. They didn't even wait for consent. At 6:30 a.m., Destiny sent a Venmo request, $4,500. Memo, moving expenses plus lease break fee. I stared at the number. $4,500. That wasn't a plea for help, it was a bill. Destiny hadn't just decided to move in, she'd already blown up her previous life, assuming I'd cover the fallout. She'd likely sublet her luxury apartment illegally and was now charging me for the consequences of her own recklessness. She called it family support. I called it what it was, a ransom demand. This was usually where the pattern repeated. Pre-Brownstone Samantha would have paid. I would have sighed, transferred the money, and told myself that being the dependable sister meant sacrifice. I would have shoved my servers into storage to make room for her vintage wardrobe. I would have compromised my own security to shield her from accountability. But as I drank my coffee, gray morning light filtering through reinforced shutters, something shifted. For 30 years, I'd been living under an unspoken agreement. Most children are loved simply because they exist. Their presence alone earns them belonging. Mine came with fees. Lisa and Jeffrey trained me to believe my place at the table wasn't guaranteed. It was leased and the rent was compliance. Fix Destiny's grades, lease paid, loan my father money for doomed investments, renewal granted. Stay quiet, absorb stress, solve problems so Destiny didn't have to, continued access approved. I wasn't a daughter, I was a tenant. And Destiny was the landlord's favorite, free to destroy property while I covered the repair costs. I looked at the Venmo request again. $4,500, the price of peace. The cost of pretending we were functional, the monthly fee for maintaining a system that drained one host to sustain the rest. I didn't decline it, I blocked her. The fear hit immediately, like cutting the wrong wire and waiting for the blast, but the clarity was absolute. I wasn't just refusing a roommate, I was defaulting on the contract. When tenants stop paying, landlords don't shrug it off. They retaliate, they threaten, they try to ruin you. At 7 a.m., Lisa called, then Jeffrey, then Destiny again. The notifications stacked up on my lock screen like a denial of service attack. They weren't checking on me. The transaction had failed and they were shaking the machine. I finished my coffee and walked over to the server rack in the corner of the studio. The fans hummed steadily, calm, reliable. This wasn't a guest room, this was the core. And I wasn't leasing space anymore. I was the owner, and today I was serving an eviction notice to the past. 48 hours later, the threat actors arrived at 10:47 a.m. Friday, my system pinged, motion detected courtyard gate. I didn't leave my desk. I pulled the camera feed onto my third monitor. No U-Haul, that would have required planning. Instead, a pristine white glove moving van idled in the alley behind my brownstone, the kind that costs thousands just to arrive. Money Destiny didn't have, which meant the bill was probably addressed to me. Destiny stepped out first. She wasn't dressed to move boxes. She was dressed for engagement, oversized sunglasses. Beige athleisure worth more than my first car, a venti iced coffee in hand. Caleb followed behind her, less partner, more accessory, shifty posture, hoodie in July. They reached the rear garden gate, the weakness I'd sealed on Tuesday. The antique latch was gone, replaced with reinforced steel and a biometric keypad. Destiny entered a code, red flash, again red. A third attempt, acrylic nail jabbing the buttons. Nothing, access denied. I watched as understanding settled in. She wasn't just locked out, she no longer mattered. A normal person would have knocked. A normal person would have called. Destiny adjusted the narrative instead. She pulled a ring light from her tote, clipped it to her phone, fixed her hair, checked her angles, and went live. I unmuted the audio feed. "Hey guys," she said, voice shaking with rehearsed vulnerability. "I didn't want to do this, but I'm literally shaking. We drove 3 hours because my sister begged us to stay, and now she changed the codes. We're basically homeless." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and took a sip of water. It was a masterclass in live manipulation, public shame as a battering ram. Comments flooded in. I could see them reflected in her lenses. "Your sister is toxic, call the police." Then the story cracked. Caleb leaned into frame, clearly unrehearsed. "Babe, the mover's charged by the hour. We need to get inside. We already gave the keys to the subletter." I froze and hit record. "Shut up, Caleb," Destiny hissed, covering the mic, but my system caught everything. "We didn't just give them the keys," Caleb argued, his voice rising. "We took the cash deposit. If we don't get in here, we have nowhere to go. You said she was a pushover." There it was, the payload. They hadn't just come for a visit. They had illegally sublet their luxury apartment in the city, taken a cash bribe from the new tenants, and torched their own living situation on the gamble that I would fold. They weren't guests. They were squatters who had burned their own bridge before they even reached mine. Destiny turned back to the phone, plastering the smile back on. "Sorry guys, connection issues. Just please tag my sister. Tell her family shouldn't do this to family." I saved the clip. I labeled the file evidence Destiny Admission 1. She wanted a viral moment. She wanted to drag our private business into the public square. Fine, I believed in transparency. I uploaded the footage to my secure cloud storage. They weren't getting in, but they had just given me the ammunition to make sure they never would. The reinforcements arrived 40 minutes later. My mother, Lisa, drove her SUV up onto the curb, blocking the bike lane. My father, Jeffrey, jumped out before the engine cut. He wasn't wearing his usual golf attire. He was wearing his business closer suit. He looked like a man coming to hostilely take over a company, which in a way he was. They didn't waste time ringing the doorbell. They went straight to the keypad on the garden gate. Jeffrey punched in a code, "My old birthday." Access denied. He punched in my social security number. Access denied. He rattled the gate, testing the hinges, looking for a physical vulnerability. Watching them on my monitors, I felt a strange clinical detachment. In behavioral psychology, there is a concept called an extinction burst. It explains what happens when you stop reinforcing a conditioned behavior. If you put $1 in a vending machine and the soda doesn't come out, you don't just walk away. You push the button harder, you shake the machine, you scream at it. You escalate your behavior dramatically in a desperate attempt to force the old system to work one last time. My family was in the middle of a textbook extinction burst. For 30 years, I had been their vending machine. I had dispensed money, labor, and compliance on demand. Now that I was out of order, they weren't accepting the new reality. They were trying to tip the machine over. Jeffrey pulled out his phone. I assumed he was calling me, but my phone stayed silent. 5 minutes later, a white van pulled up. Al's 24-hour locksmith. I sat up straighter. This wasn't just a tantrum anymore. This was social engineering. It is one of the most effective hacking techniques in existence because it exploits human empathy rather than software code. I turned up the gain on the exterior microphones. She's having a breakdown. Jeffrey was telling the locksmith, his voice thick with fabricated worry. We haven't heard from her in days. She changed the codes in a manic state. We just need to get in there to do a wellness check. I'm the owner. I co-signed the loan. It was a brilliant lie. It relied on the locksmith's desire to be a hero to help a worried father save his daughter. The locksmith nodded, pulling a heavy drill out of his van. He was about to drill out my biometric lock based on a sob story. I didn't run upstairs. I didn't scream. I simply engaged the exterior PA system. My voice amplified and crisp echoed through the courtyard like the voice of God. Attention, I said. This conversation is being recorded and streamed to off-site cloud storage. The locksmith froze. Jeffrey looked up at the camera, his face twisting from concern to rage. I am the sole owner of this property. I continued reading from the deed document I had pulled up on my second monitor. The individuals at the gate have been trespassed. If you attempt to bypass that lock, sir, you are committing a felony breaking and entering, and you will lose your license. I have already logged your license plate number. Illinois plate 472 Romeo Yankee X-ray. The locksmith looked at the camera, then at Jeffrey. The spell of social engineering shattered instantly against the hard wall of liability. You said you were the owner, the locksmith said, packing his drill back into the case. I am her father, Jeffrey shouted, dropping the act. She's mentally unstable. She sounds pretty stable to me, buddy, the locksmith said. He got in his van and drove away without looking back. My father stood there red-faced and impotent, shaking the steel bars of my gate. The extinction burst had peaked. He had tried force. He had tried manipulation. He had tried fraud, and the fortress had held. But as I watched Destiny whisper something into his ear, pointing at the keypad, I realized the attack surface was about to change. They were done trying to break in. Now they were going to try to burn me down. The noise outside had become a physical assault. My father was kicking the bottom of the gate. My mother was wailing loud enough for the neighbors 3 houses down to hear. Destiny was narrating her own victimization to her live stream, but inside the studio, the silence was absolute. I wasn't watching the family anymore. My eyes were locked on the third monitor, focused on the anomaly in the system Caleb. While Jeffrey played the outraged patriarch and Destiny played the damsel, Caleb was pacing. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at the street. He was checking his watch. He looked like a man who knew he was running out of time. In my line of work, we call that a tell. I minimized the camera feed and opened a new terminal window. I didn't use Google. Google is for amateurs. I used a proprietary background investigation tool, the kind used to vet contractors for government sites. I typed in Caleb's full name, which I had pulled from a piece of mail Destiny had foolishly posted on her Instagram story 2 weeks ago. The search bar spun for 3 seconds. Then the screen flooded with red text, flagged active indictment, State of Illinois versus Caleb Miller. I scrolled through the docket. It wasn't a parking ticket. It wasn't a misdemeanor. It was 3 counts of felony grand larceny and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. He was currently out on bail awaiting trial. And according to the bail conditions listed at the bottom of the PDF, he was prohibited from leaving the state of Illinois. I sat back, the cold air from the server cooling system hitting my neck. The picture snapped into focus. They weren't just homeless. They were fugitives. They hadn't come to visit. They were fleeing jurisdiction, and they had brought that liability to my doorstep. But the realization that hit me next was far colder and far more dangerous. It wasn't about my safety. It was about my survival. I hold a top-secret, sensitive, compartmented information clearance. It is the golden ticket of my career. It requires continuous vetting. Every 5 years, federal investigators interview my neighbors, check my finances, and audit my associations. There is a specific adjudicative guideline regarding personal conduct and association with criminal elements. If I allowed a man with active felony fraud charges to establish residency in my home, if I let him receive mail here, if I let him sleep under my roof, I would be flagged as an insider threat. My clearance would be suspended immediately. My employment contract would be voided. I would lose the 6F Figueroa career I had spent a decade building. I would be unhireable in my field. My family wasn't just asking for a room, they were asking me to commit career suicide. I unmuted the exterior microphone. The sound of my mother's sobbing filled the room. I pressed the talk button, overriding their noise. Destiny, I said. My voice was calm, metallic through the speakers. Look at the camera. Outside, Destiny stopped fake crying. She looked up, squinting against the sun. Did you know? I asked. Did you know Caleb is currently out on bail for 3 counts of felony identity theft? Beside her, Caleb flinched. He pulled his hoodie up, turning away from the lens. He didn't do it, Destiny screamed, her voice shrill. It's a misunderstanding. And so what? Who cares about his record? You have plenty of money. You can help him get a lawyer. The air left my lungs. She knew. She knew he was a felon. She knew he was fleeing the state. If a felon lives at this address, I said, speaking slowly so even she could understand, I lose my federal security clearance. I lose my job. I lose everything I have built. Did you know that? Destiny rolled her eyes. I saw it in high definition. Oh my God, Samantha, you are so dramatic. You're smart. You'll find another job. Just open the gate. We have nowhere else to go. There it was, the final data point, the complete corruption of the file. She wasn't ignorant of the cost. She was indifferent to it. She was willing to burn my entire life to the ground just to keep her boyfriend warm for a few months. I closed the background check window. I opened the folder marked Local Law Enforcement. You're right, I said. You have nowhere to go, but Caleb does. My father Jeffrey didn't handle the rejection well. He did exactly what the extinction burst theory predicted. When the psychological manipulation failed, he resorted to physical force. He went to his SUV, pulled out a tire iron, and marched back to the garden gate. I am saving you from yourself, he shouted, swinging the metal bar against the reinforced steel. The sound was horrific, metal screeching against metal, the expensive powder coating chipping away with every blow. He wasn't saving me. He was trying to break the lock so he could regain control. I didn't flinch. I just watched the monitor and logged the damage. Gate structural integrity compromised. Estimated repair cost $3,200. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. Active break-in in progress, I said calmly. Perpetrator is armed with a crowbar. I am a single female alone in the property. The police response time was under 4 minutes. When the blue lights washed over the courtyard walls, the dynamic shifted instantly. Jeffrey dropped the tire iron. My mother, Lisa, immediately crumpled into a weeping heap on the sidewalk. Destiny put her phone away. They switched masks in unison, transforming from aggressors into terrified, concerned family members. I watched from the window as 2 officers approached. My father met them halfway, hands raised in a gesture of helplessness. Thank God you're here, I heard him say through the microphones. My daughter is inside. She's having a psychotic break. She's locked herself in. We were trying to get to her before she hurts herself. It was a compelling performance. The officers looked at the gate, then at the house. They were buying it. This was the moment I was supposed to be afraid. This was the moment the old Samantha would have opened the door crying, begging them to believe her. Instead, I picked up my tablet. I walked to the front door, disengaged the deadlock, and stepped out onto the porch. The courtyard fell silent. I wasn't wearing pajamas. I wasn't crying. I was wearing a blazer and holding a tablet like a shield. Ma'am, the older officer asked, hand resting near his belt. Are you okay? I am perfectly fine, officer, I said, my voice steady. I am the sole owner of this property. These people are trespassing. She's not lucid, my mother wailed. She thinks we're enemies. I walked past my mother as if she were a ghost. I handed the tablet to the officer. This is high-definition video of that man attacking my gate with a tire iron 3 minutes ago. That is destruction of property. The officer watched the clip. His posture stiffened. He looked at Jeffrey, then back at the screen, and I continued swiping to the next file. That man in the hoodie is Caleb Miller. I believe if you run his ID, you will find he is currently violating his bail conditions by leaving the state of Illinois to evade 3 counts of felony fraud. The silence that followed was absolute. Caleb tried to back away toward the van, but the second officer was already moving. "Sir, stay right there," the officer commanded. "It's a mistake," Destiny shrieked, grabbing Caleb's arm. "She hacked his files, she's crazy. ID, sir, now." The background check took 30 seconds. The radio crackled, "Active warrant, flight risk." The handcuffs clicked. It was the loudest sound